And joining us now is Samuel Ramani. He's an associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thanks for being with us here on France 24. As we know, Ukraine is gearing up for a planned counteroffensive this spring. How do you evaluate the state of affairs at this point in the conflict for both the Russians and the Ukrainians?
Well, the Russians were expecting a much more consequential offensive in the winter of this year, but the problem was they weren't able to achieve that because they weren't even able to take over Bakhmut. They only took over Soledar. So I think that Russian offensive operations in the Kharkiv and Zaporizhia areas, as well as in Donetsk, have probably already peaked. For the Ukrainians, much depends obviously on the amount of ammunition that they have, as well as the amount of trained personnel that they've been able to assemble, and also the degree to which Western equipment, including these Leopard tanks, can just arrive on time.
What does it tell you that the Russians are now drafting citizens into the military using the electronic means? They're no longer delivering these draft notices in person.
Well, I think this is partially an antidote to the chaos that we saw occur in September, right? When there were people who were manifestly unqualified for the draft who were being included. The number of people drafted was well over 300,000. It was probably close to 1 million. We saw university students get drafted and then that getting walked back because that was a clear red line that was not allowed. We saw people with heart conditions, people in their 60s getting drafted. So this is a way of making the process a lot more efficient and a lot more effective. But it also opens the door for a stealth general mobilization. So a much larger mobilization that occurs through electronic notices. And some of the other terms that are coming with this, like the ban on leaving the country if somebody does not go with the electronic draft summons, is also aimed at preventing immigration. So I think that this could be a sign of a larger mobilization that occurs under the radar.
Well, so the New York Times has a report today based on leaks of classified documents that reveals that there's broad infighting among Russian officials with regard to the war in Ukraine, mostly arguments over the number of Russians who've been killed and wounded in the war. Did those revelations surprise you at all?
Well, I think obviously, given the fact that the Russian casualties are such a tightly guarded secret, and Russia so infrequently updates its casualty statistics, it's unsurprising that there would be disagreements among the elites. We're already seeing those disagreements basically spill over into Russian state media, where you're seeing some Russian commentators take the claim that 7 to 8 Ukrainians die for every single Russian who dies, and then you have others like I think Alexei Nomov from the Russian International Affairs Council saying that these casualty statistics are real and there are a lot higher casualties. So if those disagreements are occurring even on the tightly controlled spaces of state media, they certainly are occurring behind the scenes as reflective of a general clash between Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Wagner group, as well as pro-war Telegram bloggers who kind of are affiliated with similar views, and the Russian Defense Ministry, and increasingly now the Russian Foreign Ministry.
Well, in the meantime, the battle for the eastern city of Bakhmut is continuing. Much of that city, as you know, lies in ruins, but the Ukrainians are still managing to hold on. Why has Russia been unable to take control of Bakhmut after all of these months?
Well, I think it's been a 9-month assault on the city. I think part of it has been because of the fact that the Wagner group is simply relying on untrained forces to a large degree. It was relying on prisoners who were taken from mostly from Russia's regions and conscripts. It was only in late January when they really started strengthening and beefing up the forces with paratroopers and with more sophisticated assault corps from the Russian military. So the Wagner group wanted to go it alone. Prigozhin wanted to claim a personal victory, and he did so at the cost of forming a more adequate and stronger unit. Moreover, the Wagner group has expressed concern that Russian air support has not really come in on time either, and that Russians are ministry is stalling on giving ammunition to Bakhmut. So I think it's largely to do with the fact that there's been so much infighting between Wagner and the defense ministry that the two of them are sometimes more focused on sabotaging each other and claiming successes for themselves than actually on the frontline situation.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Samuel Ramani, Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.